After a confusing defensive coordinator hire, Boston College creates a defensive staff that's coming together and it's getting promising. Like the looks of it, basketball, they rally against Louisville.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Boston College. My name's AJ Black, and I'm the host and editor and publisher of Eagle Insider. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get yourself started. So, on Tuesday, Boston College made that confusing hire. And we'll talk a little bit more about Tim Lewis, the new defensive coordinator, in a little bit, because I got some more ideas and some more intel to tell you about the new defensive coordinator and why things happened and maybe what he could bring to Boston College. But his staff is also coming together as well, as Bill O'Brien, who is going to be introduced today on Thursday, has hired two of his three, I assume three, positional coaches for the defense. And I love both of these hires. So here is who he has brought aboard. He is going to bring aboard Jeff Commission. I'm going to say his name wrong. Jeff Commission of Maine, and Ray Brown of Wazoo. He's a defensive backs coach. So Commission is the defensive line coach. Brown will be secondary coach. So that means they just need a linebackers coach to add in there. Now, Commission is a name Boston College fans may go, that name sounds really familiar. And it really should be, because he was with Boston College from 2007 to 2010, coaching the defensive line. So this is now 14 years removed, but he coached during some pretty big years for BC on that defensive line. Like, if you go back and you want to go to those years where BC had some of the best lines that they've ever had, BJ Raji, Ron Brace, you name it, they were there. That was Commission's team. He's known as a very good coach. He's gone on to be a defensive coordinator since then at lower level schools like Old Dominion and Maine and Cornell. But his time at BC is what I look back at, because not only was he really good as a on-field coach, because man, those defensive line, don't you miss those? You know, after watching all those missed sacks last year and just the lack of physicality that you know and expect from a BC defensive line, don't you miss the times when you had, like, BJ Raji? I remember that play against Notre Dame where he took that defender and threw them into who was it? Jimmy Clausen. That was all Commission and his defense. He was obviously part of Bill McGovern's defense and Frank Spaziani's defense, but he was a big part of that. And his on-field play was great. His on-field production from his squad was good, but his recruiting is also what should open some eyes for BC fans as well, because the names that he brought in are eye-opening. It's like a who's list of BC greats in the last 15 years. He brought in Matt Milano, linebacker who plays for the Bills. He's an all-pro. Andre Williams, you remember him as the Heisman candidate, running back. Montel Harris, and one of their highest-rated recruits, Dylan Quinn. And there was more there. I mean, this guy was an ace recruiter. Quinn was one of his highest recruits, but you look at his eye for talent, and that is impressive, because one of the things that Jeff Hafley got ripped on was not just his development, but just his eye for knowing who was going to develop into solid players. I think Commission is going to be able to hit that. I think he's going to be able to really bring a high level back to BC. And, there's a lot of Northeast roots there. He's recruited, with Harris, Milano, Andre Williams. Those are all, Pennsylvania, New York guys. So that should be great, because there's been good talent in that area that we just haven't been able to mine. So good hire. Like it. Familiar name. He knows the program. He knows the area. I think that's a good hire for BC. The second hire was Ray Brown. Ray Brown comes from Washington State, so it's a power. Well, I don't know if they're considered Power 5 anymore. They were a Power 5 program until the Pac-12 imploded. Um, Lots of good feelings about what he does. If you go to the Washington State 247 board, they're pretty sad that they're losing this guy because he brought a lot of talent to that group. He coached Chow Smith Wade to an all Pac-12 conference honorable mention list. He, their defense in 2022 was third in the Pac-12, and obviously he was part of that. And they were a good defensive back group that they had. And they were talking about how he's brought in quite a few names. Now, before that, he was at Utah State and Christian Abilene. Utah State was really bummed when they lost him. So he's an up and coming coach, kind of like who could be coming in at linebackers coach. There's a kid from Notre Dame that I think a lot of folks have their eye on. Max Bullough is the last coach I think folks are looking for. This is a guy that could be their linebackers coach next year for either Notre Dame or BC. And no one seems to know which team he's going to go for. But I like how Bill O'Brien's doing a mix of veterans, like you have Tim Lewis, and then you have younger coaches that are working their way up. So you're bringing in a defensive backs coach that has had a good experience. I think he's more of a central, like a Midwest guy. I think he's from like Oklahoma. So he's not going to be having huge roots in this area, but you don't have to have that's the thing. Like if you want to have more of a national feel for your recruiting, getting guys from all over the place is not the worst thing in the world. And obviously he knows the West Coast too. So that might open some new doors for BC that we haven't seen under Jeff Hafley. So 2 hires. That means, as I said, there's 2 more hires remaining. There's linebackers coach and special teams coach. Now, there's 2 ways that BC, or 3 ways BC could go to fill out the staff. They could go outside for both. They could find, as I mentioned, the guy from Notre Dame. They could find a new special teams coach, and depending on how you felt about the special teams, that's definitely something I think that could be possible. They could keep one. Sean Duggan's still there, Paul Rhodes, but Paul Rhodes, from what I've heard, I've heard from a source that he's gone. So he wouldn't be there, or Matt Thurin at special teams. So you have Duggan and Thurin. And honestly, like if it's between Sean Duggan and the kid from Notre Dame, I'd love to see the kid from Notre Dame, but wouldn't mind seeing Duggan stick around if that's the case. Or you have both guys stay. So you have either you have some options here, but the staff is starting to come together. On top of all that, I think you're going to start seeing some of the support staff coming around too. I would not be surprised if BC finally gets a GM in charge of NIL and recruiting. Hafley had to do all of that. And I think it's a good thing to get rid of off of the coach's plate. A lot of schools just had that. I just saw Auburn hiring old BC friend Kenyatta Watson to do basically that. You need to have something like that in this day and age. So that's going to be a hire they're going to have. They still not finished Jason Tudrian's hire as recruiting coordinator. That's a huge job. With my job with 247, he was like my main contact. He's gone. And there was a hire that was going to be made like 15 minutes before Jeff Hafley left. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, and I'm not going to announce it because I haven't heard anything. So that's a piece. There's all the like analysts and things like that. Remember we had like at one point Rob Chudzinski, and you had guys behind the scenes like Chris Snee and things like that. We don't know who's going to be back and who isn't. I would imagine Chris Snee will be back, but like you're going to have some other names that are going to come up to help out with that. So keep your eyes open. It's not done. And on Thursday, BC is going to have their press conference with Bill O'Brien. Unfortunately, I have a day job, so I can't be there. And hopefully you'll get some more answers and get to hear more about what he's all about, because I think that's going to be really interesting. And on Friday, we'll talk all about his comments, because I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about Tim Lewis again, because I got some really interesting feedback about what he could bring to BC from a really good source, and I can't wait to talk to you a little bit about what I think might be the reason why Tim Lewis is coming to BC. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Now, FanDuel, with the football season over, basketball is in full swing at FanDuel. Now, you got to check them out because you can do parlays, you can do over-unders, you name it, they have it. And I love FanDuel because when you get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, you can win $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live game parlays, exclusive props, and more. The parlays is so easy to use. If you've never tried one and you're good at that kind of stuff, it's a lot of fun. So all you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and we're talking about BC's defensive staff, which is coming together. And it looks like Bill O'Brien is hitting, he didn't have to reset the entire group because, as we all know, Vinto Gabase, the defensive line coach, went with Jeff Hafley to Green Bay. And Azar Abdul Rahim, their defensive backs coach, took a defensive coordinator, or he was co-defensive coordinator as well, took a job with Maryland. So both of your, 2 out of your 3 main guys are gone. Paul Rhodes, I've heard, is gone. That gives you basically a Sean Duggan or bust. And we don't know. Pete Thamel was very quick to say that BC was working to rehire Wyatt, Darryl Wyatt, Savon Huggins, and Matt Applebaum on the offensive side. We haven't heard anything about Sean Duggan, but we did hear about Tim Lewis. And as I said on yesterday's show, I have no idea who Tim Lewis is. And I'm still confused about this hire because, late in the game, it's still plausible. Like, you're still thinking okay, at least you could get a name. It may not be a great name. Like guys just throwing the name out there, like Ted Roof. I would not want Ted Roof as your defensive coordinator, at all. But at least I've heard of him, right? Matt Patricia's out there. I don't know what his salary would be. He was a former NFL head coach, and he's worked with Bill O'Brien. He's available. So I was looking at all these different names. I'm going, okay, so, they're late, but they still should be able to get something. So they hired Tim Lewis. And I think everyone is still, and I'm 24 hours away, still confused on this hire. Talk to some sources, okay? What does Tim Lewis bring, though? Now that he's here, and from my source, he's in Boston already. So this is not like we're waiting to hear. He's up here already. So he's going to be working with the team soon. He is a disciplined guy. He's a guy that's about physicality, discipline, hard-nosed. He's going to work guys hard. I like that. If that's the mentality he's going to bring this defense, that's a huge step in the right direction. If it goes with what my theory is, which is Bill O'Brien probably has a guy next year that he really wants. He just couldn't get him this year because of various reasons. Then that's perfectly okay. That if Tim Lewis is going to come in, buckle down this defense, get them back to the basics, to doing things right, to making them nasty and hard on the field and maximizing the physicality of this team, then that sounds fine with me. It's not a splash hire. It's not a hire that's going to open a lot of eyes. But if he can make this defense solid, if he can make this defense play to the capabilities of some of the guys out there, then that's good. So the hopes that you see, if he can fix things like the front four whiffing on blocks, not on blocks, on sacks nonstop, poor Neto Ekpala, not poor on Neto Ekpala, but how many missed sacks did he have last year? If he could tighten that up, fix that would be great. If he can get the linebackers to know where they're supposed to be at most of the times instead of being all over the place, that would be great. If he can find the guys that would get them to win the most, not just guys that you know and trust, but guys that are the most talented, that would be great. If you can prevent explosive plays, get this team to, make it hard on opposing offenses, the way Boston College has always been. It's been a while. You've had, and I'll give credit to Steve Adazio because he had under Don Brown at least 1 or 2 years of this 2015, that defense was nasty. But that's probably the last time we've had a really good defense at Boston College. I'm not expecting that. But bringing back pieces of that where the defense is putting you in position to win, making plays that put the offense behind the sticks. If he can get that team back in that mentality, from what I've heard, that's his bread and butter. If that's what he can do, I am fine with this. Because as I said on yesterday's show, the fact that he hasn't recruited in 30 years or whatever it is means nothing to me. It honestly, it doesn't mean anything. And from the person I talked to, he's really well known. He's got a big circle in Georgia. So as we know, Georgia's a pretty big state. His son, Bryce Lewis, is going to be a big time recruit into the class of 25, I think. He's got a good connection down that area. So even though he hasn't really recruited yet, he knows about NIL because of his son. He knows about the area as well. So that's there. But as I said, defensive coordinators don't typically do a ton of recruiting. So I think that's an overblown issue with him. I think just the fact you don't know who he is a bigger one. But I think he'll be okay there because Tim Lokabu he didn't know anything about recruiting either. He was an NFL guy for most of the time. I mean, he had a couple stops here and there, but I don't think that's that big of a deal. You got Commission, you have Ray Brown, and you'll have your linebackers coach to do most of that. And you'll have a couple assistants to help you out as well. Not a big deal. And then finally, I think he seems like a guy that will change the culture at BC. And that's what I was saying. Like with Jeff Hafley, it was nice to see a friendly attitude. And yeah, he had a little bit of fire in him. BC, I think, needs more fire. I think that fire needs to ratchet up a level. You see it under guys like Thomas Castellanos and some of the other players, but I'd love to see him really get into it. I think Tim Lewis can do that. So I'm still confused about the hire, but I looked into, some of the things of why they would bring him here. And he loves BC. That's the other piece. I've heard from a source he really, really likes Boston College. So there's a love of the university there too. So just the fact that he likes the school, I think, that's likable, right? Now, in our final segment, we're going to wrap things up by talking about the basketball team, and Conte Morgue was in full effect. We'll give a look at that and what's going on with attendance. I'll explain my thoughts on all of that in just a moment. Now, if you like going to games, you like going to theater, comedy shows, whatever you like, Game Time has got you covered. They've got last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, everything you need to find, easy to find and get your tickets. And what I love about Game Time, they have their seat finders. Seat finders is so easy to use. You see exactly what you're going to see. Like, you want to make sure you're close if you're going to go see a comedy show. You don't want to see Jerry Seinfeld from 100 yards away. You want to get up nice and close. You'll see the exact seat and what you would see if you bought that ticket. That's great. Game Time is so easy to use, and they also have all-in ticket prices. So it's no hidden fees. Those other sites, it's like, it gives me high blood pressure when I go to buy a ticket because it's like, that's like 3 times of what I was going to spend. Game Time doesn't do any of that. I love it. It's like, oh, that's what I'm going to buy. Hey, look it. When I check out, that's exactly what I paid. It's easy to use. I love it. So with terms of applying, you need to go to go to Game Time app and use code Locked On, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, go to the Game Time. Use the code Locked On. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Go take advantage of that. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and we're wrapping things up here by talking a little basketball. Now, as I said on yesterday's show, I have been negligent about talking about the other sports, and I am not going to apologize for it because football has been the king this last 2 weeks with the Hafley leaving, the coaching hire. All anyone wants to talk about is football, and my metrics show it. So I do want to talk about basketball here, though, because BC basketball, the season has not been positive. It feels like after starting off 9-3, beating St. John's in New York, things were going to go in the right direction with a, possibly being a bubble team or being a lock for the NIT. And since then, ACC play has started, and it's been a pretty big disappointment. They've won some games, but they've also the part that's been really tough is that they've lost some really winnable games and let things get away from them, and that's not been good. So on Tuesday, BC had a 9 p.m. start, which are the worst, and played Louisville at home. And it looked like more BC frustration because they did not come out well. Louisville, who's not good, they were playing without Sky Clark. They're just chewing out the time to get rid of Kenny Payne. Came out roaring and had I think it was an 8-point lead going into halftime, and it just felt bad. Beacon Street Ball, who we've had on this podcast, has his graphic, which is where it's like a meter of where BC sports is, BC basketball is in this game, and there's alive, on death's door, and dead, and he had the line at dead at that point. It felt that way. Like, it just didn't feel like this game was going to go anywhere. Well, BC rallied, and they came back and won 89-77. Big win, like good second half rally for the team. And a win that they really, really need. Because right now they're stuck, and they're firmly stuck in a Tuesday and Tuesday tournament game mode. Like, they're going to have to play a bunch of games. They need some wins. The NIT doesn't seem like it's in the cards. It doesn't. Obviously, the tournament's not going to happen. It's just that's where it's at. Now, the biggest story that came out of this game was the attendance at this game. And if the term Conte morgue has been used a lot to talk about this stadium, and it was like bad on Tuesday night, but there's a lot of reasons for it. For the there was probably, it didn't seem like there was a ton of students there, and I'm not going to bash the students because it was the middle of midterms. It was a night game. And honestly, like, the product isn't good. Like, it's a cyclical thing right now, right? People want to go watch a good product. If the product isn't good, the people don't show up. Now the team can't fix that because no one shows up, and the recruits see this, so the product still stinks. Then people don't show up because the product still stinks. BC's stuck in this like muck where they can't get out of that, because I truly believe if BC started winning, a lot more people would be coming to these games. That's one issue. The 9 p.m. start is also terrible, and I wish the ACC would stop doing that. I know it has to do with inventory for their shows and their channels, but 9 p.m. starts for East Coast teams. There's no excuse to have that. I'm sure their ratings are terrible on their channels anyways, but it's like, I don't want to stay up that late. You don't want to stay up that late. The students don't want to show up. The fans don't want to show up. They need to stop doing the 9 p.m. starts. Like, if Stanford and the ACC is going to play Cal out there, or BC is going to play Cal at Stanford, fine. Use the 9 p.m. starts then. That sounds like a great way to use some of your West Coast times. But stop home games at BC at 9 p.m. It's death for that, for fans. And it's not just BC. I've seen other teams having this issue too. Duke won't have that issue, but most like mid-tier teams, no one wants to stay up till 11 o'clock at a basketball game. So that's an issue. As I said, it was midterms. It was a bad Louisville team. Louisville is awful. And thank God BC beat them, because they're really bad. So you have no like star power to encourage fans to be there. And then, as I've heard from fans and students, there's no buzz like created by the school. Like, and I'm not talking the team itself. I'm talking like marketing and ops and stuff like that. Like this, like the big get for this was $2 hot dogs. Like, who cares? Like, I had a couple students say that if they didn't know about it from Twitter, from a few other people, like the sickos that talk about BC all the time, they wouldn't know this game was happening. BC needs to do a better job internally of getting excitement out for this. And I don't know what that means, like getting things there so that people are interested. Like, I know that because of blue laws, you can't do beer deals, but be creative. That's your job. Like, get people there. Give them, like, if you're playing Louisville and the product is not what's going to excite people to be there, do something else. Giveaways, like get BC t-shirts, do Quinten Post bobbleheads. I don't know. Do something to get the word out there and get it out more to the students. Like, get the excitement on campus too, because I think that would help. But whatever the case may be, there needs to be some change there. And there's a bunch of factors that made it so that on Tuesday, it was dead. It was so dead at BC. Like Conte Morg effect to the max. So that's going to wrap up today's show. This was a morning episode. I fell asleep late. I was exhausted yesterday, so I didn't record until this morning. So hopefully you enjoy this, and we'll have more news. We're going to talk about Bill O'Brien's first press conference. What do we learn about it? We'll talk about that on Friday's show. You're not going to want to miss it here on Locked On Boston College, your team every day.